Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. Today I want to take a chance to show you guys what I put in my own travel watercolor kit, especially now that we're getting into summer and I have several conventions and it's vacation season, and I love being able to find a way to compact everything that I need to be able to create watercolors into something very transportable. So here we're starting off with a nice little bag that fits the three divisions of basically everything that I need. And I'm going to try to show these basically in chronological order. And I'm going to show you a little painting that I do with only these supplies at the end. And while I'm painting that, I'll talk a little bit more about the supplies. But very first off, and I like to keep them subdivided into a couple different bags. This allows me to pack them as efficiently as possible, at least the way that I like to think about it. It also allows me to be able to pack them into other bags, larger bags, the most effectively. So if I'm using a backpack, I can put them where they fit, and if it's in a purse like this, I can pretty much take up the whole space. But first things first, I have a little zipper pouch that I put my painting board that I tape down to, and that I get questions on that every once in a while. It's just foam core, which is basically just that really thick school board that you can find in the cheap office supply section, and I cover it with packing tape, and that makes it waterproof, and you can make it in exactly any size that you want. So it's perfect for this kind of transportation because I cut it down to a really small 5.5 by 7.5 size. That way I could tape down these papers. And then I like to bring little pre-cut watercolor cards that are nice and small. I much prefer to work on a smaller surface when I'm traveling. And that's where I also keep a couple of sheets of my paper towels. It's actually the shop kind where it has a really thick, almost fabric texture to it. I love using those most of all, but that keeps that little zipper pouch nice and flat. And then moving on, I keep my pencil pouch, which has my pencils and my pens and my brushes, and it also has a nice big pocket for other loose leaf stuff. And in there, I keep my little mini roll of artist tape that I use to tape down my paper. And I also like to keep a little pan of Cintiq gold. I don't know which one exactly it is, but it's one of those that's very opaque and metallic. I love carrying that around. I think it's just really fun for me to be able to incorporate a little bit of metallic into these quick paintings that I do on the go. So I like to keep one in a little baggie with me at all times. Oftentimes I'll actually bring the whole palette, but this time I pared it down to just one. And then the most important component to this whole kit is my watercolor palette. And I love this thing. It's actually the first watercolor palette that I owned since I got back into them, but this one is perfect for traveling. But there's so many different options. You can get ones that are pre-filled, that have pans in them. I preferred to go this way since I like to get my watercolors in tubes. So I got this one, and I'll have a link to this particular palette down in the description because I've been really happy with it, but it is very sealed. It has basically a gasket around the edge of the rim, so even if there's still some moisture in it, if I close this up, it's not going to leak out, which is great for putting in bags. And in that, I just have a basic core set of paints, my favorites in there, or at least my favorites when I first started going in with my watercolors. And you'll see on the other side too, or at least you might see, I put a few little dabs of some of my newer colors just so I can get a touch of those paints when I need them. Okay, now that we're finally going to get started with the actual little painting, I can talk about it a little bit more in order and thoughtfully. But at the very beginning, I didn't show where I transferred my sketch onto this paper because I use a very light blue pencil. And again, I mentioned this, but it's really great for transferring things onto watercolor papers because it doesn't smear into the paint when you're using it like graphite can. And because it's so pale, it's easy to cover up. Although I have noticed that if I push a little bit too much on it, it will allow the paint to not actually adhere over top of it. So I do have to be a little bit more careful of erasing it after I'm done so that it doesn't sit there and expel the paint. But I always have one of those pencils, and then moving on, I like to use my Micron pens when I'm traveling. I always love them still, and I'm trying to get into using different techniques, but this one is great for just sitting down and creating a piece that I'm really happy with. It also allows me to be a little bit more on the lighter side as far as the layers for my watercolors, which is really important when I'm traveling and painting, is that I want to be able to do something quickly and then put it away and be done with it. So being able to go in with line work that reinforces the paint that I'm using a lot better than, at least for me, just going in linelessly. It just works great for when I'm out and about and producing quick watercolors. And I am completely out of order. I forgot to talk about the paper that I'm using here, because I do actually use sometimes a different type of paper when I'm traveling. I like to use Arches when I'm at home, but I found that I like to use B paper. They're cold pressed watercolor, just 140 pound. I like to use this paper when I'm traveling specifically because it's just a little bit cheaper than the other paper and it's a little bit smoother, and I find that I feel less timid about drawing right on top of it than I do with my Arches, and it's smoother, so it is easier to draw right on top of it, which of course is way more practical when I'm traveling and I don't have a light box and I don't necessarily always have the desire or the time to spend a lot of effort making sure that the sketch is correct and then transferring it over. But since they're all loose leaf, I still have the option where if I have a great sketch that I love in my sketchbook, I can still use a transfer method like using a window to transfer it over onto the final paper. So that's still available to me, but I don't feel quite as tied to the need for that as I do with some of the other papers that I use. And I think that's kind of psychological, but it helps me enjoy it a little bit better, finding the right kind of paper for the right kind of situation. And when I'm pretty much anywhere, I always try to make sure that I have my water bottle with me so I can drink lots of water during the day, but it's also very helpful when you're using watercolors and you need water. I was showing a metal cup, and that's what I've mostly been using, but I'd really like to finally buckle down and get one of those collapsible water dishes. That would work way better for this, for being able to pack up nice and tight. So that will be the next investment I'll make in my watercolor kit. But I love being able to put together these watercolor kits for myself. It makes me really excited about being able to paint while I'm on vacation, which is something that I sometimes have a hard time committing to and making happen. But the more thoughtful I am before I go, the more I actually devote some time to actually using it. But this kit, this is everything that I need to be able to paint and create artwork in a way that's comfortable for me. Depending on where I'm going to be, I might pack more or a little bit less. I am planning on going to a couple conventions, and that's really what I'm getting this kit together for, is my next convention where I'm going to be sitting behind a table. And usually for those, I pack a little bit more. I pack bigger paper and a little bit bigger of a board, and I also pack that whole golden watercolor palette, and that just gives me a little bit more room to breathe. And since I'm going to be stuck behind a table with a certain amount of storage anyways, that's what works for me. But if I was going to go on a little camping trip, I would cut all that stuff out and I'd basically just bring this kit, the bare bones of what I need to be able to create paintings. And one thing that I really try to make sure I'm prepared about is I want to always make sure I have enough paper packed. I find that when I only have a couple pages, even when I know that I'm not going to do that many watercolor paintings, it really holds me back. I'm afraid to try out something and I'm afraid of ruining a painting because I am so limited. So I try to be sure that I have just no risk of running out of paper, and it really actually does make me feel a lot more comfortable of actually using the supplies that I brought. I also want to make sure that I have enough so that I can use the paper to have a test strip and to use as much as I want. I found that when I'm really stingy about using real estate on my paper for tests, the less enjoyable the whole process is because I can't make sure that everything is flowing and working the way I want it to. So yes, I make sure I have plenty of paper so that I can make as much art as I want and as many mistakes as I like. And a final thing that I totally forgot to talk about and forgot to use in the recording is my white gel pen. I like to be able to add highlights and rim lighting and special effects. One of the things I love doing is just adding a bunch of little white dots, especially ones that overlap shapes and line work. I think it just gives it a little bit of a fun atmospheric look. And it's very easy to take with me, but I forgot to use it until after I stopped recording. Like I mentioned, there was a couple places that really needed that highlight, particularly in the bird's eye. It just needed that one little finishing touch. So once I could add that in there, that helped. Also, small side note, but I found that I really love being able to go in with my metallic paint and add those detailing, and then I like to go in with my white gel pen and add some really sharp highlights in the middle of those. That really pushes the fact that it looks a little bit more metallic in an illustrative way rather than just a literal way. And that is it for today. I do have a list down in the description that'll show you all of the stuff that I showed, at least hopefully everything that I showed in the video today of what I use in my traveling watercolor kit. So if you want to check that out, that's all down there. I also have this little painting available at a very affordable price, and she's a nice little quick painting, but if you'd like to own that, I have a link down in the description that'll take you over to my art shop. And that is, again, pretty much it for today. I will be back next Wednesday with another video, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you then.